shows of them that's on now. The Trekkie thing is because you have fans that are, fans of the original series, not necessarily fans of some of the newer series, and you got fans because they're all over the map. They don't always all agree with each other, which is hilarious to me. But
I didn't get into it until Enterprise. The series Enterprise with Scott Bakula. I actually really enjoyed that one.
That's an interesting place to start. It's kind of the nadir of the series is with Enterprise.
I enjoyed it. I know a lot of original series fans didn't like it. I think I lucked out in that I'm not a big enough fan to not like the new stuff. Do you think would Gene Roddenberry be happy with the way it's gone? Do you think?
Well, I don't know how happy he would be, but I think that he would have some issues with that. The way that the new universe, the new Star Trek universe has been envisioned is very different from the Roddenberry universe. If you look at the original series and the Next Generation, it's a universe where man is the center, or human beings and aliens, and they have to rely on themselves. They're the ones in charge of their own destiny. They're going forth boldly and on courageous missions, what have you. In the new series, once it was rebooted, the first or most recently, what was it, around 2010, the J.J. Abrams reboot, that universe, they ask the writers about this, there are a lot of things that happen just randomly, like they land on a planet and Spock just happens to be in a cave where they land on an ice planet and he's got a fire going. Where did he get wood? And how did they happen to land on an entire planet and just land right next to where he is? A lot of coincidence happens, and the writers answered that by saying that it was fate. Fate put them there. And that to me seemed like kind of a weak way to write, to base your writing on fate. But also, fate requires an entity behind it. And it makes it more of a God-centered universe, where Gene Roddenberry was a humanist and an atheist, and Kirk was constantly going down to planets and unveiling fake gods and telling, it's a computer, it's not a god, and putting humans back in charge again. So his universe was more of a humanistic universe, and the current approach is more, it's an action picture with more of a spiritual universe. And I think he would have something to say about that, right or wrong.
My big question right now, and I don't know, maybe Gord, you can help me with this too, because you know a little more than I do. With the gender conversation that's going on now, and the gender neutrality, I guess I should say, where would that fit? Are they going to work that into the Star Trek universe? Or they've been pretty...
Well, you could say they have already, because there are aliens that are asexual or gender uncertain.
Sure.
I guess that's absolutely true, because there actually are a couple that have, you can't tell the male from the female, if you will, or even if there is a male or female.
But Kirk still sleeps with them.
Well, of course, Kirk.
The original series is a very strong masculine-feminine dynamic.
Yeah, very.
They definitely sort of, but do you think that, I wouldn't even say that was necessarily even a conscious decision that they were necessarily doing, as much as it just, when you're looking at different species across the entire universe, some of them are bound to be very drastically different than just having a male and a female. So I think that was a really good natural thing for that show to do.
It's logical. If you look at different animals or different species on our planet, you're going to find some clone each other, some switch genders. There's all manner of untoward things going on. But also the good writing on Star Trek, if you look at particularly the original series, but current writing also, it'll tend to reflect whatever's going on socially at the time. Even though the story's set in the future in space, it's about what's happening right now to us socially.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
So,
but what I like with these, they don't dwell on the fact, though. That's one thing I really enjoy about it. They might have those characters in there, but they don't, They don't have somebody walk up by going, "Hey, look, a gender neutral alien, awesome."
Are we on the right track? Do you think, politically, socially, to get to where they are one day? Like
first we have to survive, and that's questionable. If we're how many more years we're going to make it as a species?
That's very true. With Trump planning on going to the moon in 2024, do you think that's just part of that? That's part of surviving? Is it maybe planning ahead for when we ruin this planet?
Well, the moon's not a very hospitable place. We do better to fix up this environment than to try to make it rain on the moon.
Oh, I fully agree. I like the moon for a starting point for space mining. There's a lot of resource extraction they can do out there. That's what I've been reading about. That seems really cool. Launching from the moon, trying to figure out. I guess they found water. They're saying. And they want to figure out how to make fuel on the moon so they don't have to carry so much with them.
That's the key, right, to find it there.
I've just always wondered, if we ended up habitizing the moon, if you dropped your pants on the moon, is it still considered a moon, or do you have to call it an Earth?
Yeah. I see what you did.
Did you see what I did there? That's terrible.
So do you still go to conventions at all? Do you follow the Star Trek fan base anymore? Or you kind of moved on from that?
Less occasionally. I mean, depending what kind of documentary I'm currently making, since I spent the last 7 years working on this marriage question and the truth about marriage, and so I spent more time immersed in that world than I did in the Star Trek world. And before that, I worked on a documentary called The Nature of Existence, which is about belief systems and existentialism. And so I went to the source of all the major religions around the planet, found an expert, and interrogated him or her about that religion or belief system, and immersed myself in that thinking. But I can see myself going back there soon again, certainly if we work on a final sequel.
The only convention I ever went to was in Vancouver, I want to say about 10 years ago, and it was the first year that UFC came to Vancouver, and the Star Trek convention was in the lobby of the hotel where all the UFC fighters were staying, so we kept passing each other, and I just kept thinking, if there's a rumble here, this is going to be the shortest, most terribly one-sided rumble ever.
Unless somebody pulls out a phaser.
Yeah, that would be it. The game changer.
Phaser against all the UFC guys.
I was really hoping. I ordered a copy actually to get a copy of your Existence documentary, and I'm fascinated by this. I love discussing religion with people. Eric and I both kind of do for different reasons, or sometimes the same reason. But I'm utterly fascinated, and I was up on your website checking out, and you have the 85 toughest questions in existence. And I thought it was kind of humorous going through it because I found pretty much absolutely every question really simple to answer. Because when you eliminate the concept of man-made religion, a lot of this other stuff becomes real simple to answer. And I found it really fascinating. So to be able to get a hold of the I'm really excited to be able to watch your documentary on that. I'm very excited. I was hoping to have it before we got the interview, but unfortunately, no.
Well, one of the questions that's a good example is I asked all these questions usually of everybody, and I would start with, why do we exist? That was my opener, which is an impossible to answer question, really, and which leads to, what is our side? Go down the list. What is sin? What is the soul? What is the afterlife? And if you take one of those, like, what is the soul? How do you explain what the soul is? Well, certainly the different religious experts had different ways to explain what happens to you when you die, where you go. My favorite answer came actually from a particle physicist at Oxford who had the shortest answer. He said, when I said, what is the soul? He said, the soul is a type of wishful thinking that resides in the frontal lobe.
Fair enough.
That's fantastic.
Very short, very succinct.
Did you find there were a lot more similarities than differences when you compared them all? Like,
well, part of the humor, it's a very funny documentary. It's more of a comedy, really, because existentialism is about absurdity. You have to embrace the absurdity of existence.
of
And there was, when I talk to religious experts, they tend to regurgitate scripture. They swallow all the scripture and then regurgitate it instead of thinking for themselves, thinking critically. And a scientist, by nature, has to think critically and examine and ask why and challenge. And so they come at it from a much more philosophical point of view than a religious expert. But when I ask them all the same questions and then juxtaposed all their answers side by side, it became naturally humorous to watch one person after another. When I would ask a question like, what is the afterlife? They're all cocksure of themselves. They have the answer, and then they'd be diametrically opposed to what the next person says, who's also absolutely certain that he has the answer. And the next one after another, it becomes naturally absurd.
It really does. I think the closest we've come so far is, I think Douglas Adams has pretty much the closest to reality, I would imagine. If I had to choose a religion, it would be something
the number 42.
See, after going through these questions, there's only one question about all that actually got me the most, and ironically enough, it's what is truth? And the reason is because, well, truth is nothing but perception and opinion, really. You can have 10 people standing around staring at the blue sky. If 9 out of the 10 people say that sky is green, well, the sky is green because, numbers have it in the sense. And that's the way truth, especially nowadays, has really become. So using that question for everything else, it became, I don't know, a lot of it just became really humorous for me because, truth is truly is an individual thing, because even if you have all the science, even if you have all the theory, everything worked out, even if you have all the thing right there, it's still not going to convince people that it's true.
See, that's the argument I used in my novel, that facts are really just rumors that everyone kind of agrees on.
Absolutely.
You have to, yes, let's say you have a truth. You're right. Perception, Descartes said you can't trust your senses, and so your perceptions are going to naturally be flawed. So what do? We all have to agree on something in order to communicate and interact with each other. We all sort of agree that gravity happens. If you drop a pencil, it's going to fall to the floor. And the way we know that that's true is because you can repeat that experiment, and it happens every time. It's never not happened. We have a lot of data. And then scientists, that's what they do. They collect data to prove what they want to advance as their best theory. And you'll never have a scientist say that they have the truth. They will say, the more data we have, the closer we can get to truth. You can never actually reach truth in that sense, because you'll never have infinite data. If someone says they have the truth, you should check for your wallet, because they're probably a con man.
And that was deductive reasoning, is it not? That's the
scientific method. Yeah, right. And the scientists, well, if they have a hypothesis and they tell you that this is what we believe, evolution, for instance, and here are the reasons, you can go and repeat their experiments yourself and see for yourself if it happens, and if it's accurate, it has to repeat. The experiment has to be repeatable. Now, you can't repeat an experiment. There is no experiment for religion. You've got to believe me because I say so, because it's written in a book written by dead guys from 2,000 years ago. There's nothing to repeat. There's no proof. So one of my favorite questions is, like, what is faith? And if faith is believing something without evidence, how is that different from foolishness?
Or a lie, yeah.
In my opinion, it isn't different at all, but I take a lot of issue with just taking faith. I need proof of everything. I'm